Chapter 401. Prince Rui had already taken his seat. The Gong Prince waited for a while before getting up and standing in the middle of the field. However, the courtiers were still constantly congratulating Luqingdi, not giving him any face. What emperor's good fortune, Qiyuan's prosperity, especially the people in Prince Rui's faction, it was simply a deluge of heavenly flowers, as if because of this white tortoise, Qiyuan could stand for thousands of years without falling. Because he already knew that his birthday gift was inferior to the previous two, he didn't want to take it out, but his own will and being forced by others were two different things. That's right, in the Gong Prince's view, he was deliberately targeted, each and every one of them wanted him to make a fool of himself. He was standing in the middle of the field, but these people were endlessly praising the previous person's gift. What difference was there between him and that clown? However, the Gong Prince thought of the current situation and held back, because he knew that at this time, showing an expression that he shouldn't be showing would be courting death. After all, Luqingdi was in a good mood. If he showed an expression, it would be absolutely disappointing. Therefore, he maintained a smile, maintained his poise, and wanted to see if these people could keep talking. To say that no one was a fool, if they went too far, Luqingdi wouldn't think that he was biased, it wouldn't benefit Prince Rui in the slightest, and it would make the other countries' envoys laugh at them. Therefore, some people gradually stopped before going too far. The Gong Prince glanced at them. If you have the guts, then keep talking. The Gong Prince pretended to brush his robes, and then greeted Luqingdi. This time, I've been beaten by my two elder brothers, Imperial Father, please don't dislike this subject's son. Luqingdi was in a good mood, with the Gong Prince's words as a foreshadowing, the following things, even if they were inferior, it wouldn't make Luqingdi unhappy. The 100-life embroidered screen was brought up. Although it was inferior to the previous two, it was done with great care, and compared to the 10,000-life rune Venerable, the font was more clear at a glance, so naturally there were more people who could appreciate it, and those who liked embroidery wouldn't necessarily feel that it was inferior to the 10,000-life rune Venerable. For example, Jingwan was more inclined to this embroidered screen. Li Hongyuan reached out to hold Jingwan's hand, and moved closer. Wan, don't worry. Jingwan was slightly surprised. She tilted her head to look at him and lowered her voice. Why does Wang Yi say this? Li Hongyuan also understood that he had probably misunderstood. Just now, I saw that your expression was strange. I thought that you were worried after seeing their birthday gift. Jingwan chuckled. It's not because of that. It's because of that turtle. She gently glanced to the side, seeing that everyone's attention was on the 100-life embroidered screen. She continued, white turtles are actually a kind of whitening phenomenon of ordinary turtles. Their whole body is white, only their eyes are bright red, and their neck is transparent, very much like a carved work of art. They are more afraid of light, and may have other diseases. It's hard to say what this turtle is like. Maybe it's just that it's white, nothing else is affected. Because it's white, it's easy for natural enemies to find it and attack it, so it's more difficult for it to survive than normal individuals. Therefore, the number of white turtles should be more than what people know. This kind of turtle should be more difficult to raise than ordinary turtles. In the process of raising it, it's hard to say whether its color will change, and if there's too much light, then something like a sick turtle wasn't that serious. After all, this kind of whitening phenomenon wasn't rare in the animal world, such as white snakes, white rabbits, white mice, white monkeys, white foxes, white lions, white tigers, and so on. However, it was never said whether they were sick or not. Their genes were usually stable, and they didn't have any diseases. Because of their appearance, it was true that it was harder to survive without the protective color. Li Hongyuan understood Jingwan's meaning, and his heart felt a little strange. White turtles had always been known as the incarnation of the gods. Once they appeared, it was said to be an auspicious sign. He originally thought that Li Hongming had gotten lucky this time, but now it seemed that this luck wasn't so good. Regardless of whether the turtle itself had any diseases, even if it didn't, raising it was a big problem. It was too easy to make a fuss about it. What did a white turtle mean? Everyone knew that if something went wrong, it would definitely implicate more than one or two people. When the situation is unstable, it's actually not wise to send a living thing. However, in my opinion, it's not wise to send a living thing at any time. If someone really wants to frame you, not to mention killing it, just making it look sick is enough to make people eat their heads off. Since it's a living thing, especially if it's offered as a birthday gift, it will inevitably be linked to the person who gave it away. Moreover, a white turtle is a living thing that is linked to the fate of the country. It's a good omen, but the accompanying risk is also considerable. Li Hongyuan nodded, so, Wan's choice is very good. Your Highness, are you deliberately mocking me? Jing Wan raised her eyebrows. She didn't put any thought into the choice at all. It was completely to save trouble. It was a joke from a TV series in her previous life. This husband is just telling the truth. No effort, no money, it can be done casually, how could it not be good? Although the birthday gifts that he had presented in the past, he had only casually picked one from the rewards. Where it came from, it would go back to where it came from. Perhaps it would end up in his hands in the end. In terms of carelessness, who could compare to him? But even so, every year at the birthday celebration, if others didn't have it, he would have it. At this time, the Gong Prince had already returned to his seat. Speaking of which, the 100 longevity embroidered screen was also a first-class thing, but he wasn't too lucky. However, he still received a reward from Luqingdi. As long as he received 3 in a row, he would basically get a share of the rest. What's more, there was an envoy from another country, so it was time to show off. It was also precisely because of the presence of the envoys from other countries that the birthday gifts, which were originally carefully prepared, were put in more effort. When they learned that the envoys from other countries would come to participate in the birthday celebration, they changed the birthday gifts. Therefore, no matter what, it would not be bad. What would be different would probably be the rewards that would be given later. Therefore, the sickly fifth Wang Ye, who didn't appear in the past few years, also did well this time, receiving a few words of praise from Luqingdi. Because of the fifth Wang Ye's body, he had long given up on the idea of seizing the throne. Because his body simply couldn't bear to think too much. If he wanted to prolong his life as much as possible, he must relax his body and mind. Even when he was still studying in the palace, his schoolwork was much less than the other brothers. The teachers who taught them didn't have any requirements for him. Therefore, no matter what Luqingdi's attitude towards him was, he was unfazed. Next was the living king of hell who was, in the limelight. It couldn't be helped, the existence of Jin Wang Ye was really too special. The envoys who arrived in the capital 2 days before Qi Yuan still didn't have the time to understand Li Hongyuan, but those who came early were different. They had enough time to patiently and carefully understand. Speaking of which, this matter wasn't considered difficult because it was basically a well-known matter. However, the more they understood, the more they felt that it was inconceivable and contradictory, and the more special it was. He was obviously the one with the least power, but it was hard to not pay attention to him. After Li Hongyuan came out from his seat, many people marveled at his appearance. Of course, there were also those who looked down on him, such as the Xiongnu. For example, there were many tribes in the north who paid attention to that kind of exposed strength and toughness. People like Li Hongyuan, in their eyes, were just like the Qi Yuan people who didn't have a single redeeming feature. Li Hongyuan stood in the middle of the main hall. His face was still expressionless, and he just turned his head to let people bring up the birthday gift. There was no mystery, no concealment, just unusually straightforwardly put the thing next to him. When everyone saw the thing clearly, they couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. What was this situation? Speaking of which, didn't Jin Wang say that he was the richest among all the yellow seeds? Even if there was no longevity tattoo venerable, there should be a rare treasure like the white tortoise, right? It was rare for Luqingdi to be a little annoyed with this son of his. He loved this son so much, but at this time, he actually slapped his face. But thinking about it, it also didn't seem right. Long live Fu Huang, a bucket of Jiangshan. Li Hongyuan unhurriedly said these 8 words. As soon as these words came out, everyone suddenly realized. Although it was just a bucket full of ginger, when piled up, it was like a mountain, unifying the country. For an emperor, was there any higher expectation than this? Even if it was just an emperor without any ambition, he would absolutely not refuse such praise. Although for other countries, this was probably very provocative. If it was only the people of Qi Yuan, there was no problem at all. However, who was Li Hongyuan? The arrogance and condescension of the King of Hell had reached the peak of perfection. Good, Luqingdi laughed loudly. How could this son lose face for him? Although this year's birthday gift was the most worthless, in fact, it was the most valuable and also the most attentive. Whether it was from the heart of an emperor or from the heart of a father, Luqingdi was quite happy at this moment. In this way, the cheapest birthday gift, in an instant, was comparable to that white tortoise. It could even be said that it was better. Emperors sat on vast lands and innumerable wealth. No matter what kind of rare treasures were, they were nothing in their eyes. They were far inferior to things with a good meaning. Fu Huang, there is another gift. It was made by my wife. Originally, I should have given it to you in private, but in my opinion, it is more appropriate to give it to you now. Oh. What is it? Show it to me. Li Hongyuan asked someone to bring in the gift. It was a long brocade box. Jing Wan was also surprised. She didn't expect that this gift would be taken out in front of her face. Luqingdi's servant came down from the side of the throne, took the gift, opened the brocade box, took it out, and was about to open it. Fu Huang, it's better for you to open this painting yourself. As for whether you want to let others see it or not, it's better for you to decide after you see it. Li Hongyuan's words naturally aroused people's curiosity, not only Luqingdi. Luqingdi still did as Li Hongyuan said. He took the painting, waved the servant away, and unfolded it. When it was only a third of the painting, he suddenly stood up from the throne. The expression on his face suddenly changed. The smile disappeared completely. After a blank expression, his eyes became particularly sentimental. There seemed to be a faint trace of tears in his eyes. His hands couldn't stop trembling. He seemed to be particularly careful, as if he was afraid that he would accidentally damage the painting. He was so attracted by the painting that he even forgot the current situation. Fu Huang. Li Hongyuan's voice rose by 3 notches. Luqingdi was suddenly awakened. Then he realized that he had forgotten himself. He looked at Li Hongyuan, slowly sat back, and gently rolled up the painting. You said that it was painted by your wife. Luqingdi's voice was a little hoarse. Yes. From the painting to the final framing, it was done by Her Highness. Except for me, Her Highness, and Fu Huang, no one else saw it. Well, it was actually Li Hongyuan who framed it. Luqingdi's eyes fell on Jingwan. My 6th daughter-in-law is very thoughtful. This painting is very sincere. I have never received such a suitable birthday gift. It should be rewarded. Just tell me what you want. This was a big promise. Jingwan hurriedly got up. I'm not worthy of imperial father's praise. This daughter-in-law originally did not want any reward. I just wanted to express my filial piety. Speaking of which, it was a coincidence. It should have been the same as the other birthday gifts, but I didn't expect Prince to present it so seriously. Luqingdi naturally thought that this coincidence was the trip to the Pei residence in Jiangnan. My sixth daughter-in-law is right. This painting is worth it. If she can't appear here, who can? https://11/11807/7307151. Chapter 402. Naturally, many people were curious about a painting that was praised so highly by Luqingdi. However, there were still some people who guessed the content of the painting. Therefore, they all had different expressions on their faces, and their thoughts were more suitable to be enumerated. After all, Luqingdi's last sentence was enough to elicit a lot of things. Who, if he simply talked about the painting, should have used words like what or thing? Therefore, it was very likely to be something in the painting. It was very likely to be a person. And there was only one person who could make Luqingdi lose his composure like this. After Li Hongyuan, it was the seventh lord's turn. It must be said that among them, every one of them had done their best to prepare the birthday gift. But now, Emperor Luqingdi's whole attention was attracted by the painting. He looked at it from time to time, touched it, and wanted to open it again several times. But after all, he had scruples about the occasion. If not, he would have just left in a huff, found a place to look at it quietly, and reminisced about it in silence. Therefore, after the seventh king, no matter what it was, Luqingdi's attention was not on it. It was good enough to get a nasal sound from him. The most embarrassing moment was when his son knelt down for a long time, but he did not respond at all. At this time, Jingwan felt a little embarrassed. It was as if it was not a painting that was sent to him, but a super demon who could bring disaster to the country and the people, who could steal Luqingdi's soul in a second. On the other hand, Li Hongyuan did not feel guilty at all for pranking his younger brothers. He was calm and looked more leisurely than anyone else. He drank by himself and occasionally peeled a nut and threw it into his mouth. Because his absent-mindedness was too obvious, people naturally became more curious about what kind of painting could make Luqingdi lose his composure like this. If they knew, they might be able to make use of it. Of course, this was the idea of the envoys of other countries. In fact, it was useless to know. How could they make use of a dead person? Find a substitute. Don't be kidding. For a person like the imperial noble consort, even if she disguised herself, she would be seen through in a second. Moreover, not everyone was suitable for a substitute. If the substitute was too perfect, it would not be on the same level as the fake. Such a fake, not to mention pleasing people, was more likely to cause anger for profaning the sacred beauty in people's hearts. The so-called substitute would be cut into pieces. The imperial noble consort was probably such an existence to Luqingdi. What was more, the one who looked the most like the one he loved was his son. However, because of the difference in temperament, unless Li Hongyuan showed a special expression, Luqingdi would never stare at his son in a daze. What value could the other fake have? It seemed that it was absolutely impossible to get the details from Luqingdi. These people naturally glanced at Li Hongyuan and Jingwan. After all, no fourth person had seen the painting. Well, actually, Li Hongyuan showed the painting to Nanny Gong to ensure that it would be effective in front of Luqingdi. However, Li Hongyuan was really calm and completely ignored the people around him. As for Jingwan, she couldn't be as good as Li Hongyuan. With a little pretense, her expression was also perfect. Therefore, no matter what these people thought, it would all end in failure. Didn't Luqingdi have a portrait of the imperial noble consort when she was alive? Why was he so fascinated by a painting now? Of course, there must be. However, freehand brushwork paid more attention to the charm and was more or less lacking in the form. Moreover, as a court painter, there was a limit to his ability. After all, the real famous painters in Qi Yuan were all from famous families. The worst of them were from a scholarly family. They had their own pride and loftiness. They really disdained to be a court painter who only served the royal family. For someone like the imperial noble consort, if they were not good enough, they couldn't draw such ethereal beauty and temperament. After several times, especially when there was a living person to compare with, Lu Qingdi became impatient. 2 or 3 of the portraits left by Lu Qingdi were self-portraits of the imperial noble consort when she was alive. Out of modesty, Lu Qingdi didn't know his own ability when he painted. Even so, Lu Qingdi couldn't put down these paintings for a long time. Of course, Lu Qingdi had more than these 2 or 3 paintings. After the imperial noble consort died, Lu Qingdi crazily asked the court painters to draw a portrait of the imperial noble consort according to his memory. However, Lu Qingdi was not satisfied with the portrait painted by the imperial noble consort. Moreover, they couldn't draw a painting that satisfied Lu Qingdi with only their memory. If Lu Qingdi didn't need them to continue to draw, they would have been torn apart. Under Lu Qingdi's pressure, the paintings became more and more similar, but there was no charm. In the end, Lu Qingdi had to give up. Now, he suddenly obtained such a painting that had both the form and the spirit. It was just like a real person. Naturally, it made his memory of the past clearer. Moreover, the person in the painting was too beautiful. Especially that smile, it was as if it was going to melt half of the person. Although Lu Qingdi had spent the past 20 years in his memory, there was still a big gap between the things in his memory and seeing it with his own eyes. At this moment, Lu Qingdi only felt that she was really smiling at him. In fact, there wasn't much beauty between the imperial noble consort and Lu Qingdi. The imperial noble consort wasn't the kind of person who blamed the heavens and others for the changes. No matter what happened, she would adjust herself as much as possible and then face it with a good attitude. However, she didn't have any feelings for Lu Qingdi. Naturally, she wouldn't take the initiative to do anything. Lu Qingdi watched her too closely. In the first 3 years, she wasn't by his side. After she was by his side, it was obvious that Lu Qingdi couldn't spend all his thoughts on her in the depths of the palace. As the saying goes, the tree wants to be quiet, but the wind won't stop. When Min Yuhan appeared in the capital, Lu Qingdi was already hot-headed. When he thought that he was devoted to her, this person was still thinking about someone else. Naturally, he exploded. If this was the case, how could there be any beauty between them? The expression of the person in Jingwan's painting was like a dream to Lu Qingdi. It wasn't that the imperial noble consort didn't have a pure and happy smile when she was in the palace. However, the object of this smile wasn't necessarily Lu Qingdi. It wasn't even a person. It was just a flower or a bird. The things that couldn't be obtained or lost would become the sand in the heart of the white moonlight. All the bad things would be selectively thrown to the back of the mind. The only beauty would be infinitely magnified and magnified to the point that it would be hypnotic to think that everything was beautiful in the past. From this, one could imagine how deep the influence of this painting on Lu Qingdi was. Knowing that they were in a tragedy, the princes behind moved quickly. They didn't hesitate at all. They greeted, gave gifts, said auspicious words, and then scrambled back. It didn't matter if they were princes who had grown up and were conferred the title of king or princes who were still in the palace. To avoid the tragic situation of not being able to get up after kneeling, they wouldn't kneel if they were clean. Therefore, the gifts presented by the princes became the most typical example of a strong start and a weak finish. Next, it was the turn of the envoys from the various countries. The empress didn't have enough energy and was already a little tired. At this time, she had no choice but to tactfully remind Lu Qingdi. Princes, after all, were his sons. As their father, if he made them lose face, then so be it. However, the envoys of these countries were different. Even if it was a small country, he had to give them face. Qi Yuan was a country of etiquette, the Celestial Empire was a great country. As the emperor, there was no reason for him to do such a disrespectful thing. Luchingdi wasn't at that level. Although he didn't intend to put down the painting in his hand, he still looked at the envoys from the other countries from the beginning to the end. He was expressionless and didn't show any disrespect. Speaking of which, the gifts prepared by the envoys weren't very special. The big countries didn't need to curry favor with Qi Yuan and didn't want to bother at all. The small countries couldn't bring out anything that was enough to shock the people of Qi Yuan. Most of the gifts were local specialties of their own countries. Anyway, they were precious enough and wouldn't embarrass them. Some of the smaller countries even brought out things like gold, silver, and jewelry. The special gifts were a pair of little white tigers and a piece of white tiger skin. They came from two small countries respectively. It was quite a coincidence. Jingwan was extremely attracted by the cuteness of the two little white tigers. Well, Jingwan was actually a cute lover. Li Hongyuan didn't know what being polite meant. If his wife liked it, he directly asked for it. He didn't have any reservations at all. Naturally, Luchingdi waved his hand and allowed it. https://11/11807/7393987. Chapter 403. At this time, Jingwan realized a problem. During the welcoming banquet for the former Wei and Chang kingdoms, those singers and dancers were still dressed as lightly as they were in summer. She reckoned that they were not any better now. However, one should not forget that it was still snowing outside. Although it was not as heavy as last night's, one could imagine how cold the weather was. She felt that even wearing one less layer of clothing was unbearable. As for them, because there were so many women present, they definitely did not wear more than 3 layers of clothing. Most of them were still a layer of thin fabric or a layer of light muslin. There was no need to think about cotton-padded clothes. If they wore such thick clothes, how could they dance well? How could they show off their enchanting figures? However, she could only think about it. She could not reach into the palace. At this time, an envoy from a small country to the west of Qi Yuan stood up and expressed to Luchingdi that they had brought a few women from their country. They were good at singing and dancing. They wanted Luchingdi to appreciate the charm of their foreign women. It was obvious at a glance what his motive was. Everyone was clear about it. However, not many people were angry. At most, the young concubines in the imperial harem were angry. The others were purely amused and wanted to see a joke. Countries like the former Wei, southern Qi, and western Xiongnu were even more disdainful. The people of western Xiongnu showed their disdain on their faces. There were also people from Cangjin. Their envoy group this time was mainly made up of women. They were even more disgusted by the use of women to curry favor with big countries. However, it had nothing to do with them, so they could not say anything. Luchingdi, on the other hand, looked a little normal. In fact, he was still distracted. He did not even think about the intentions of the small country. He agreed without much thought. Then, the 5 women walked in. However, the moment they saw them, they more or less opened their eyes. They all muttered about how immoral they were. Jingwan's first reaction was to feel cold. Her palm-sized skirt was tied in front of her chest. There was a deep cleavage at the top. The cloth looked like it would burst at any moment. The muslin skirt below was below her navel, hanging on both sides of her hips. There were bells on her wrists and ankles. There was also a small waist drum at the side of her waist. There was a long veil at the back of her head that trailed to the ground. This outfit was more provocative and eye-catching than the most explicit performance Jingwan and the others had seen in Jiangnan. At the same time, orchestral music came from an unseen position belonging to the musicians. Compared to the tunes they were used to, this tune could be considered explosive. A few dancers stepped to the rhythm and beat the waist drum. Their movements were abnormally hot and seductive. Although they considered themselves cultured, they could not take their eyes off this time. People like the Xiongnu, who were not so calculative when it came to matters between men and women, did not hide the desire in their eyes. It was a scene of ugliness. When the envoy of the small country saw this scene, he felt proud. So what if they were big countries? They were all the same. However, when he looked up at Emperor Luqingdi, his pride dissipated a lot. It was obvious that he did not care about it at all. The Emperor of Qi Yuan had such strong self-control. So, all the coquettish glances were thrown to a blind man. It could only be said that some people were unlucky to be disturbed by the King of Hell. Jingwan was appreciating it in a more normal way. Well, if some of the more deliberate movements were removed, it was actually not bad. What do you think, Your Highness? Jingwan chuckled softly. The princess is more serious than me. Li Hongyuan's tone was a little cold. Jingwan's smile became more obvious. Although someone liked to get jealous easily, Jingwan felt that he was quite cute sometimes. So, in fact, she also had masochistic tendencies. Well, she should restrain herself. She should not annoy him, otherwise, she would be the one suffering. Li Hongyuan's expression was a little dangerous, but he did not say anything. Jingwan was puzzled, but Emperor Luqingdi's eunuch came to her side. Your Highness, the Emperor wants to talk to you. Since Emperor Luqingdi wanted to see her, Jingwan quickly got up and went over. She stood 3 steps away from the throne, but Emperor Luqingdi felt that it was not enough. He waved his hand and Jingwan was only 1 step away from him. 6th daughter-in-law, did you see Wanwan's portrait in the Pei family? Jingwan hesitated for a moment. Father, in fact, no. Just by hearing some things, he wanted to do something. Many people said that His Highness looked like the imperial noble consort, so this daughter-in-law boldly asked His Highness to wear women's clothing. Originally, he was very unwilling, but because he wanted to give it to imperial father, and His Highness also wanted to see what the imperial noble consort looked like, this daughter-in-law compared it to His Highness. In the process of painting, this daughter-in-law weakened some parts and turned it into this painting. Jingwan said, slightly embarrassed. Emperor Luqingdi could not believe it and was even a little stunned. Really? He looked at Li Hongyuan a little differently. This was a different kind of colorful clothes to entertain the relatives. Yes, there are some things that His Highness just doesn't say. She should earn some favor for her husband. Emperor Luqingdi sighed. I know that although Yuan is a little scoundrel, he is actually a good child. Jingwan smiled. Father, how much does His Highness look like the imperial noble consort? In the painting, that is her. You painted very well. I like it very much. It's good that father likes it. Speaking of which, His Majesty the Emperor of the Qi Yuan. The envoy of the West Han tribe suddenly stood up. He was a standard burly man, wearing a leather jacket and a leather hat. In the eyes of the people of the former way of the Qi Yuan, he was a real barbarian. Of course, in their eyes, the people of the Qi Yuan had thin arms and legs and were good-looking but useless. This was just the evaluation of these people who lived like princes. They admired the Qi Yuan soldiers who guarded the border cities. Of course, this kind of feeling was hidden in their hearts. On the surface, there was only contempt and deep resentment. After all, the Qi Yuan occupied fertile land, rich assets, and countless women. https://11/11807/7460732. Mobile Edition. Chapter 404. Although he was unhappy, Luqingdi did not show any emotion on his face. However, his expressionless face made him look more dignified. Jing Yuan sighed in her heart. After all, he had been the emperor for 20 to 30 years. No matter how bad he was, he still had a lot of things that he should have. Among his sons, although there were quite a few who were strong, they could only use their sharp claws and teeth in front of him, including Li Hongyuan. Before they were prepared, they would not easily make a move. "Father, your daughter-in-law will return to her seat first," said Jing Yuan. "No rush." He tilted his head. "Bring a small stool over." After giving his orders, he looked at Jing Yuan with a warm smile. "Sit next to me. I have something to ask you." Since he had spoken, Jing Yuan could only sit down obediently. This seat was very eye-catching. However, it was only a small stool, similar to an embroidered stool. Sitting next to Lu Qingdi's feet was the same as a junior sitting next to an elder. It did not matter. Instead, it gave her weight. If she could gain Lu Qingdi's favor, no matter how unreasonable she was, even imperial concubine Su would have to think twice before doing anything to her. Perhaps this was the reason why her husband had presented the portrait on the spot. The foreign beauty's dance had already ended. The beauty was enchanting, her dance style fiery. However, apart from making some unrelated people's blood boil a bit, the main character's heart didn't even stir up a single ripple, only suffering a bit of coldness for nothing. TSK, she really was quite pitiful. It seemed that the imperial concubine was without a doubt Lu Qingdi's true love. Only then did Lu Qingdi look at the envoy of the West Xiongnu. He did not say anything, but his meaning was clear. Speaking of which, other than the former Wei, the Qi Yuan's mortal enemy, the Western Xiongnu and Southern Qi were also real enemies. Their borders had never been truly peaceful. Southern Qi was a bit better, but the Western Xiongnu were lacking in resources and drank the blood of Mao Ru. They were all martial people and were naturally warlike. No matter how one looked at it, it was impossible for them to remain indifferent in the face of a fat piece of meat like the Qi Yuan. The West Xiongnu and North Xiongnu were originally from the same family. However, the two brothers had a falling out, and not only did they split up, but they also became mortal enemies. It was so serious that they had to pacify their internal affairs before resisting foreign aggression. Comparatively speaking, the North Xiongnu was weaker. It was only 30 years ago that they proposed to marry the princess of Qi Yuan as a way to establish diplomatic relations. With the marriage of Princess Heiyang, they originally wanted to borrow the power of Qi Yuan to get rid of the West Xiongnu. However, in the end, Princess Heiyang killed the king of the North Xiongnu. The North Xiongnu was crippled by Qi Yuan, and it would be difficult for them to recover for decades. However, Jing Yuan believed that the West Xiongnu must have contributed to this as well. It was just that Qi Yuan would not record this down in history. There were many reasons why Qi Yuan did not directly invade and take over the North Xiongnu's territory. Apart from the huge difference in cultural heritage between the two countries, it was too difficult to subdue the North Xiongnu. Another reason was the terrain. If the North Xiongnu were to be included in Qi Yuan's territory, it would be a little like a gourd. The North Xiongnu would be at the smaller end of the gourd. Although there were not many places that bordered Qi Yuan, they were surrounded. Furthermore, the West Xiongnu would definitely take care of things. After weighing the pros and cons, they took some benefits from the North Xiongnu and retreated. However, it was really strange that the North Xiongnu did not get swallowed by the West Xiongnu and become the powerful Xiongnu again. Your Majesty, the Emperor of Qi Yuan, we Xiongnu worship martial arts and are not interested in these girly things. Why don't we let our warriors fight to liven things up for everyone? It will also be a blessing for your Majesty. What do you think? Regardless of whether it was the North Xiongnu or the West Xiongnu, they all considered themselves as Xiongnu, just like how the former Wei considered themselves as Great Wei. However, they really came up with the idea of using martial arts as a blessing. However, if the Xiongnu appeared in other countries and did not flaunt their martial arts, they would not be called Xiongnu. Approved. Luqingdi was too lazy to care about this kind of thing. As expected, a burly West Han man who was accompanying them stood out and tore open the leather jacket on his upper body. With a tug on both sides, he pulled out his hands and tied the jacket around his waist, revealing bulging muscles that looked like tree bumps. He looked rather powerful. Previously, when the woman revealed her arms and waist, these noble ladies of Qiyuan still had to avoid looking at her, not to mention now, who knew how many people's faces turned green. Jing Wan slightly shifted her gaze, and also could not help but frown. Although the cultural background was completely different, it was not to the extent that she did not understand it completely. Seeing their reaction, the West Xiongnu people did not restrain themselves. Instead, they slapped the table and laughed loudly. The man in the middle deliberately shook his muscles. I've long heard of the valiant men of Qiyuan. Our Xiongnu women all look forward to it. I hope you won't be stingy with your guidance. Although he said so, his provocative and contemptuous look was simply too obvious. Many people of Qiyuan were filled with righteous indignation. They almost slammed the table and stood up. However, they still had to maintain their gentlemanly demeanor. Of course, not everyone could maintain their gentlemanly demeanor. Furthermore, there were some people who could not be provoked. Li Hongyuan casually threw the wine glass in his hand. It fell to the ground with a clatter and shattered into pieces. At this moment, it was particularly eye-catching. However, Li Hongyuan's expression was still indifferent. His demeanor was better than anyone else's. It was as if the person who did this was not him at all. He Zhihai, properly teach our noble guests what is called, when in Rome do as the Romans do. Today, your fists should not be like cotton. Otherwise, when the time comes, Ben Wang will turn you into cotton. When the West Xiongnu people brought it up, He Zhihai was eager to give it a try. However, he was suppressed by his mother and grandmother. He could only be restless. Thinking about it, in this situation, without the orders from above, they naturally could not act blindly without thinking. Now that he heard Li Hongyuan's words, he inexplicably trembled. Then, he deeply understood Jin Qinhuang's meaning that, the former fifth prince of Wei was beaten by him until he could not get up. Jin Qinhuang also said that his fists were like cotton. In other words, he only needed to leave him with one breath. Or, sparring, sometimes it was inevitable that he would not be able to stop. Luqingdi did not speak. It was clear that he tacitly agreed with Li Hongyuan's meaning. To be honest, Li Hongyuan was usually infuriating, but at this time, it made people feel particularly relieved. After all, the other party had already provoked him. Of course, it was more satisfying to slap them back on the spot. He Zhihai rubbed his fists. However, he was only 16 years old. Even if he was taller than his peers and stronger than his peers, that face still looked like it had not completely shed its childishness. Such an appearance would naturally be looked down upon by others. The West Xiongnu people's ridicule was a very normal thing. He Zhihai did not get angry. Instead, he grinned and said, "That's right. Xiao Ye's hair is not even fully grown yet. So, sometimes, it is inevitable that I do not know my limits. If something happens, please be magnanimous." Xiao Yi had already said the ugly part first. Chapter 405. Mother, why do I feel that this bastard has grown a brain after following Jin Qinhuang for a period of time? Old madam, he muttered. Old madam, he didn't say anything. If all her guesses were correct, then Jin Qinhuang was definitely not ordinary. If he really wanted to teach that stupid grandson of hers who only knows how to fight, then obviously he wouldn't just teach him how to use his brain to fight. Old madam, he started to look forward to her stupid grandson's future. Clearly, the other party was infuriated by He Jihai's mischievous attitude. Originally, he already felt that a little kid was a great insult to him. Now that he spoke so arrogantly, if he didn't teach him a lesson, wouldn't others look down on the Xiongnu people? We Xiongnu people have been practicing martial arts since we were young. At the age of 10, we are all warriors. I don't know about your Qiyuan people, but don't you think I will treat you like how I treat the Xiongnu warriors and not show mercy? That's exactly what I was looking for. If you were merciful, then it would seem that this young master is bullying you. The fight was on the verge of breaking out. Both of them had used their full strength, so how could they show mercy? Both of them didn't have this thought. That Xiongnu person was still as fierce as before, but He Jihai's change was more obvious. He restrained his smile and showed fearlessness, valiance, and even madness. It was as if he was facing the strongest opponent. He didn't treat his own people the same way. Subconsciously, he would restrain himself. Now, this was an enemy, and the kind that didn't care if he was beaten to death. In just 3 moves, that Xiongnu man felt an absolute pressure. His heart shivered. Qiyuan had actually produced such a monster. If he didn't deal with it carefully, perhaps he would fail miserably. Just as he was thinking, He Jihai's left fist suddenly landed on his body. From the right to the left, the back of the fist smashed onto his left cheek. His face was deformed, and his body was deflected due to He Jihai's strength. Not only that, He Jihai's fist seemed to have landed on his heart at the same time. That Xiongnu person stabilized his body with great difficulty and didn't fall to the ground. However, he only got back a little bit of his face. The corner of his mouth overflowed with blood and the teeth in his mouth were knocked out. However, he didn't dare to spit them out. Thus, he put on a show of swallowing the blood and teeth. Not only that, but his chest as well. Although his heart wasn't injured, there was definitely something wrong with his ribs. Even breathing was painful. His spiritual seed did not continue to attack, but his posture seemed relaxed. He was in a state of battle readiness, ready to attack or defend. He grinned. "You're still distracted when you're fighting with this young master." He whistled lightly. "You really have guts." Without another word, he lunged forward again. Without any misgivings, the bigger and fiercer the more he fought, the fiercer he became. Moreover, he was only facing one enemy now, not a group. It was also not someone like Jin Qinhuang who had a way to suppress him. Naturally, he didn't need to use his brain to fight. However, Jin Qinhuang's recent training for him was very harsh, but he still preferred this kind of most direct fighting style. When little gangster he went all out, there weren't many people who could stop him. No matter how tenacious you were, you still fell down in the end. Furthermore, you weren't able to stand up immediately and staggered a few times. His spiritual C's feet slightly rolled, shaking his fist. "Kneel down and admit defeat, then this young master will let you go. How about it?" Under normal circumstances, after fighting to this extent, one should know that they were absolutely not an opponent. Admitting defeat was nothing. But after his spiritual C said this, the nature was completely different. Even if they didn't want to fight, they had to continue. His spiritual C was goading them. It could also be considered an open conspiracy. If they didn't want to be humiliated, then they would stand. The result of continuing to fight was naturally blood splattering everywhere. Every time they were beaten down, the words, "kneel down and admit defeat," would jump out from his spiritual C's mouth. And the other party persisted. Every time they got up, they would fall down again at an even faster speed. His spiritual C would also shake his head and click his tongue from time to time. "It's just admitting defeat, why bother? For someone like you who stubbornly refuses to admit defeat, that's not called having a backbone, but purely having a problem with your brain." His spiritual C scratched his head. This young master fought for half a day. It shouldn't be that I'm really fighting with someone with a problem, right? The living king of hell had always been infuriating. Little gangster, he was not to be outdone. Internally, he would definitely make people fume with anger. But to outsiders, especially those West Han people, each and every one of them gnashed their teeth and looked as if they couldn't wait to eat someone. TSK, this psychological side was simply too satisfying. However, this kind of cruel and bloody scene, there were still some people who didn't dare to look. In the end, that West Han person couldn't get up anymore. He struggled on the ground. If his spiritual seed continued to attack, this person would most likely lose his life. The manager of the West Han people stood up with a whoosh, but before he could open his mouth, his spiritual seed kicked the person on the ground out, landing right next to the West Han people's seats. His spiritual seed clenched his fists. How boring. Although this young master likes to bully people, I won't go so far as to bully someone who can't fight back. However, this warm-up isn't enough. Who's next? Hurry up, come up. Did the West Han people still dare to go up? The manager glanced at the person beside him. That person shook his head slightly. Clearly, after the battle just now, he was very clear that he was no match for this Chi Yuan brat. If he went up, he might end up in the same situation. He was a well-known figure in the West Han people. If he fell here, looking at the half-dead person on the ground, even if he could survive, he would definitely be crippled. What would happen to a crippled person when he returned to the West Han people? Just thinking about it made him shudder. Therefore, he definitely couldn't go up. The manager's face darkened as he forced a stiff smile at Lu Qingdi. Your Majesty, Chi Yuan is full of talents. This person must be the #1 warrior of Chi Yuan. Really, his spiritual sea sneered. Don't put this young master on a pedestal. #1 warrior. This young master is just an insignificant pawn. I have nothing to do all day. I'm just an idle playboy. In Chi Yuan, there are a sea of people who are more powerful than this young master. Didn't you hear our prince say that this young master's fists are made of cotton? In short, do you still want to fight or not? Speaking of which, his spiritual sea shouldn't have casually responded. However, Lu Qingdi wouldn't care about this kind of slap to the face of the enemy country. The West Han people looked at his spiritual sea sinisterly. However, this kind of gaze had no effect on his spiritual sea at all. Chapter 406. Li Hongyuan glanced at it and moved his line of sight away. Your mouth is more nimble than your fists. He Zhihai shuddered again. Just a moment ago, he was immensely proud of himself and even prepared to go to Jin Qin Wang to show off his merits. In the end, if he had known earlier, he would have ended the battle quickly and directly crippled the person. Why would he have so much nonsense to say? Thinking of the possible encounter that would follow, the overlord instantly turned into a tortoise. Jingwan looked at He Zhihai's appearance and raised her hand to cover her mouth to hide her smile. During this period of time, she had come into contact with He Zhihai. He Zhihai initially gave people the impression that he was an absolute little overlord, but in reality, this person's nature was not bad. Other than being extremely obsessed with martial arts, he was a bit too straightforward and was also a qualified fanboy. Towards Li Hongyuan, his attitude was, male god oppresses me 1,000 times, I treat male god as my first love. No matter how miserably he was beaten up by Li Hongyuan, he would be revived on the spot in seconds. His own people had cleaned up the person who provoked him, but he couldn't be too smug. Lu Qingdi had people invite the imperial physician. Let's not talk about other things, whether this person was dead or alive, the skill of face still had to be done. Is there anyone else who wants to exchange pointers, no matter which country? He paused, don't overdo it. Needless to say, there really were people who continued to go on stage and then directly chose their opponent. This kind of situation generally happened between two countries that had enmity with each other. Probably because He Zhihai was too fierce, the other countries didn't find fault with Qi Yuan. In addition, Lu Qingdi had arranged for people to watch. In case a certain two people got angry, it would be easy to pull apart. In this kind of situation, after all, it wasn't the first time that Li Hongyuan and He Zhihai fought. Moreover, they didn't use weapons, so it was more than enough to pull apart. Without Qi Yuan's matter, Lu Qingdi unrolled a few scrolls of painting and turned to speak to Jingwan. Jin has never seen this painting technique before. Where did Lao Lu learn it? It wasn't strange that Lu Qingdi didn't know about the fine brushwork technique. Unless it was a member of the imperial family who was proficient in painting, otherwise, who would run to him for no reason to say this? Jingwan chuckled. To tell imperial father the truth, this painting style was created by my elder brother. It was only last year that the style gradually matured. It would be a lie if Lu Qingdi said that he was not surprised. Then, he sighed. Minister Luo is an outstanding and upright person. The Luo family is also a first-class family. It seems that the descendants of the Luo family are all excellent. You are all good children. Jingwan smiled but didn't say anything. It wasn't easy to answer, but Lu Qingdi didn't want Jingwan to say anything. Later, Lu Qingdi asked about their trip to Jiangnan to the main house of the Pei family. No wonder he brought it up after such a long time. The main reason was that he was asking for trouble by asking his son about it. As for Yu Zhongqing, he explained it in detail. However, he was a man and not the person involved. There must be a difference between the two. If they were to talk about this matter, they had already prepared a confession long ago. Jingwan was very clear about what could be said and what could not be said. There would not be any mistakes. After all, she was a woman. Jingwan spoke in more detail. Moreover, her speaking skills were incomparable to Yu Zhongqing's. She also talked a lot about the imperial noble consort before her marriage. Although she learned most of it from clan head Pei, it was all good things. Lu Qingdi naturally liked to hear it. In the past, the imperial noble consort was a taboo in front of Lu Qingdi. However, ever since Li Hongyuan beautified their relationship, Lu Qingdi seemed to have forgotten some of the things he did in the past. He couldn't wait to let the world know how good his relationship with the imperial noble consort was. Jingwan also used Li Hongyuan's name to inquire about the imperial noble consort from Lu Qingdi after she entered the palace. The two of them could be said to be happy and harmonious. At this moment, Lu Qingdi smiled again. Moreover, it was a very amiable smile. Ignoring the dragon robe, he looked like an old man who had lived the rest of his life comfortably. Moreover, he was the kind that his children and grandchildren liked to revolve around. Jingwan saw this and really didn't know how to describe her heart. The fight below was very lively. Jingwan and Lu Qingdi had become their own world. Unsurprisingly, there were far more people watching them than watching the martial arts competition. Many people were envious of Jingwan. Among them, no one had ever been so close to Lu Qingdi. Even Lu Qingdi's favorite princess didn't have such an honor. Everyone knew how much benefits a person could get from Lu Qingdi's favor. Therefore, they must be jealous and cursed in all kinds of ways. However, no matter what, they didn't dare to show it on the surface. Moreover, from today on, Jingwan would definitely be the second favorite in Lu Qingdi's heart. It was even possible for her to become the first favorite. Firstly, she was a woman and also a daughter-in-law. Naturally, she wouldn't talk back to Lu Qingdi like Li Hongyuan and could talk to him nicely. Secondly, she was the only one who could draw the portrait of the imperial noble consort in Lu Qingdi's heart. With the first one, there could be a second one, and a third one. It was as if she had grasped Lu Qingdi's lifeline. Li Hongyuan had to stand aside. Therefore, it was just a matter of time before Jingwan could do whatever she wanted in the capital city. In the same hall, two worlds went their separate ways just like that. Before the banquet, Lu Qingdi stayed for an hour. Naturally, he couldn't wait to leave. At this moment, he urgently needed to be alone with his imperial noble consort. Jingwan returned to Li Hongyuan's side. The two didn't say anything. They just exchanged a tacit glance. After an hour, some personal problems were solved. They returned to Thousand Years Hall. Because they had made arrangements early, there naturally wouldn't be any problems at this time. Rows of palace maids, who looked like spring onions, brought in all kinds of exquisite dishes. However, in the middle of winter, these things only looked good. It was cold and chilly. How many people would take the initiative to reach out their chopsticks? At least half of the dishes on the table had to be removed the same way they were served. However, the dishes on the table today were different. There were 4 main dishes that were placed on a special small stove. There was smokeless charcoal in the stove. It was burning below. Steam rose from the top and the fragrance assailed the nose. Those who originally didn't have an appetite felt a little hungry now. Many people felt that the imperial kitchen had produced a smart person this year. Why didn't they think of this earlier? In the past few years, they were all cold. They were basically always hungry and cold. Lu Qingdi came late. His mental state was a little contradictory. He seemed a little dejected, but also a little excited. The banquet began. Everyone drank together. This meal wasn't bad. It was just that the drinking competition was a little fierce. Lu Qingdi didn't refuse anyone. In the end, he naturally drank until he was high. Chapter 407. The Empress let 2 palace attendants support Lu Qingdi as he left. According to the usual situation, there was still some time before the banquet ended. Moreover, without Lu Qingdi sitting, the people below actually drank even more happily, so no one would care about whether Lu Qingdi stayed or left. After Lu Qingdi left, the Empress also got up and left. After sitting for so long, her whole body felt uncomfortable. If she did not go back and rest, she estimated that she would not be able to hold on. She could not attend, but she could not. Because her illness had already affected their faction. If she did not show up and let people know that she was not bad, she estimated that this effect would expand. In fact, at this time, whether it was the Empress or the entire faction, they had already realized that the position that the Empress occupied was too heavy. This was originally the result that the Empress wanted, but there was a big premise. The Empress had to be healthy. This time, her sudden illness undoubtedly gave them a head-on blow. The Empress's age was about the same as Lu Qingdi, but because she took good care of herself, she had always been relatively healthy. She did not think of this at all, but now, if you worked so hard and died before you achieved your goal, that kind of feeling was not worth mentioning. However, at this time, even if the Empress wanted to adjust and weaken her own existence, it was already too late. Therefore, she could only hold on. After the Empress left, Qin Shu Fei also left. Even before this, she was indifferent to the various toasts from the women with official titles. Because she was temporarily in charge of the Phoenix Seal and the Empress's health had not recovered, her status naturally rose. There were many who wanted to curry favor with her, but unfortunately, Qin Shu Fei did not accept them at all. At Jingwan's table, there were only 2 people, her and Li Hongyuan. Only the princes who had not been bestowed the title of prince would share a table. As for the other adults, each person occupied a table. 10 people to a table. 1 Wang Ye, 1 Wang Fei, plus the 2 Wang Fei. There were still 6 seats left. As of now, no family had 6 children. However, it seemed that Jin Qinhuang's table was the most idle. The other tables, no matter how you looked at it, it was a bit deserted. Naturally, it was very irksome in all aspects. However, Jingwan was now thick-skinned and big-hearted. She ignored him, not to mention Li Hongyuan. Jingwan retracted her gaze and looked at Li Hongyuan. With just one look, Li Hongyuan already knew what she was going to do. Li Hongyuan unhurriedly reached out his chopsticks to pick up a certain dish and put it into his mouth. Their table was cold and cheerless. Even if someone came to toast, they would also hurriedly leave after a toast. No one would linger to exchange greetings. Firstly, Jin Qinhuang did not have that value. Secondly, the reputation of the living king of hell was too great. Whether he was happy or angry was not something that could be said for fun. Jingwan also continued to eat. Although it had been quite a long time, she ate a little occasionally. Her stomach was really empty. This method was sent into the palace by the prince. What else? If it's all cold dishes, Princess Consort will have to starve for the whole day. Li Hongyuan said matter-of-factly. He did not hide that he was doing this for his wife. Fortunately, Li Hongyuan and Jingwan's voices were not loud. Otherwise, Jingwan would become the target of public criticism. Ben Wang is going to change clothes. Li Hongyuan flicked his sleeves and got up, leaving Qian Chenhou. As the number one attendant, Mu Gonggong naturally followed. At this time, there were many people going in and out. Li Hongyuan swaggered out, so it was not strange. Jingwan quietly ate at this time. At this time, it was still very early. If she did not eat something, she would suffer later. Old Madame Luo could not leave at this time. The one who accompanied old Madame Luo into the palace was Jingwan's eldest aunt, Wang Shi. If Jingwan wanted to see her birth mother, Zhang Shi, at this palace banquet, she still had to work harder for her father who was determined to make progress. Speaking of which, it was not impossible to bring Xiao Bei along, but old Madame Luo did not do so because it was not necessary. Moreover, entering the palace on such a cold day was really torturous. Jingwan inadvertently looked up and saw that a drunk former Princess Wei Yining being helped out of Qian Chenhou by a servant girl. Jingwan naturally withdrew her gaze. At this time, she was pretending to be drunk, but soon, she would be really drunk. Jingwan suddenly looked forward to the good show later. As expected, one who is close to ink will be stained black. Li Hongyuan returned after another quarter of an hour. Half an hour. There were many things that could be done, things that could not be done, and things that could be done. Jingwan was slightly surprised. Didn't you say that you would leave this matter to me? Li Hongyuan raised his eyebrows. Why? Is Princess Consort blaming Ben Wang for competing with you in front of Imperial Father? Jingwan immediately understood. She went to see Luqingdi, but she did not know what purpose he had in mind. Did he advance or perfect her plan? When the banquet was about to end, the snow outside stopped. Not only that, the sky turned sunny very quickly. So, Luqingdi's birthday this year was indeed a good day. Since the sky was sunny, they could naturally continue with the entertainment activities in the afternoon. The 4 major opera troupes in the capital had all entered the palace and they had specially prepared a performance for Luqingdi's birthday. In addition, there were many different operas from the 4 troupes. With all of them gathered in one place, it was needless to say how exciting it would be. Jingwan did not really like it, but she was looking forward to it. The stage was set up in the Imperial Garden and it was several times bigger than the usual stage. As expected of the 4 most famous opera troupes in the capital, they did not disappoint. The people who knew Qi Yuan's operas the best were naturally the former Wei. Surprisingly, many of the envoys from other countries also liked it. Although in Jingwan's eyes, those people did not understand it at all. They were just cheering like ghosts. When no one else was around, they cheered loudly and their voices were surprisingly loud. They thought that they were sincere, but the Qi Yuan naturally thought that they were vulgar, barbaric, and rude. The difference between their backgrounds was too big. It was indeed an insurmountable gap. 2 hours after the performance, Lu Qingdi appeared. In fact, he was not very drunk. Of course, even if he was drunk, it was still not clean for a man and a woman to lie together naked. Moreover, Jingwan noticed that there was an unusual mark on Lu Qingdi's neck. It was obvious that the deed was done. But at this moment, the men's and women's seats were separated. She could not communicate with her husband. Someone came in a hurry, found the former Wei Crown Prince, and whispered something in his ear. The former Wei Crown Prince's face was so dark that he almost overturned the short table in front of him. He sat down, as if he was weighing the pros and cons, and also as if he was suppressing his anger. Then, he suddenly stood up. "Your Majesty the Emperor of Qi Yuan, shouldn't you give me an explanation for this matter?" Lu Qingdi looked at him impatiently. He was also very annoyed that he had slept with a woman for no reason, especially when he missed his lover deeply. Obviously, he was drunk and did not know how it happened. Logically speaking, when he was drunk, even if he did not rest in the bedchamber, there would only be people guarding him. There was no reason for anyone to break into his resting place. In fact, no one had entered. It was just that he was drunk and did not have a good rest. He did not know why he ran out. Not only did he run out, but he also slept with a woman. He had sent people to investigate the specific situation. If he just slept with a palace maid or a junior of a minister, it was not a big deal. He did not care about the former. As for the latter, he would just give her a place according to her status. But it just happened that she was the princess of an enemy country. He could do whatever he wanted in his own territory. He did not think that he was wrong. But she was a princess of another country. She should have someone to take care of her when she was drunk. Why did she wander around? Anyone would have a conspiracy theory, let alone an emperor. Therefore, Lu Qingdi's face was gloomy. "Your Highness, you don't need to worry. Once the matter is cleared up, we will naturally do what needs to be done. However, whether I give you an explanation or you give me an explanation is another matter altogether." Everyone could see that Lu Qingdi was in a terrible mood. The former Wei Crown Prince's face was also not very good. However, he did not flare up at this time. Although he was an envoy and represented Great Wei, he was only a prince in the end. In other small countries, he was naturally high and mighty. In the face of a country that was on the same level as Great Wei, he did not dare to resist. After all, only his father could talk to the other party on the same level. If it was said that Lu Qingdi was a conspiracy theory, then wasn't this former Wei eldest prince also a conspiracy theory? They were in someone else's territory, but something happened to his little sister. Everything was over, and he only received the news. If it was said that his good little sister slept together with the person she fancied, then it was possible that she threw herself into his arms. However, the other party was Qi Yuan Emperor, a rotten old man who could be Yi Ning's grandfather in terms of age. What kind of temperament Yi Ning had, he was very clear. That ambition was higher than the heavens. Would she choose Lu Qingdi, this kind of grievance, for the sake of not going to a barbarian land for political marriage? It was impossible even if the sun rose from the west. In addition, the matter of Jin Qin Wang of Qi Yuan was basically a done deal in his opinion. It was impossible for her to make trouble by herself. Without a doubt, it must be Qi Yuan's side. If it was not Lu Qingdi, then it was someone else. Eldest imperial brother, what happened? The former Wei Crown Prince made a deeply concerned expression at this time. The former Wei Crown Prince did not even look at him. "Your Majesty the Emperor of Qi Yuan, please allow this prince to leave first." Without waiting for Luqingdi to respond, he flicked his sleeves and left. The former Wei Crown Prince was not willing to be treated like this. He followed without saying anything. Luqingdi was slapped in the face like this, but in the end, he did not flare up. However, his face became more and more gloomy. Some people seemed to be dignified without being angry. As the emperor, once he was angry, although it was not as terrifying as millions of corpses, it could be imagined that at this time, absolutely no one would dare to rashly come forward and provoke him. There was no need to think about what the former Wei Crown Prince wanted to do. He had to know the cause and effect from Princess Yining. Because of this incident, Luqingdi must have strengthened his defenses. At this time, some people could no longer casually walk around the palace. Therefore, even if the former Wei Crown Prince went to find her, he would at most understand the situation from Princess Yining. Although not many people knew about this matter, there was no need to hide it. Moreover, this kind of thing had always been a loss for women. Luqingdi's chest was filled with depression, so he did not give the order to keep it a secret. Therefore, after he came over, before the play was finished, many people knew about this matter, especially the imperial concubines and the various princes. Most people did not have any reaction on the surface, but their hearts were different. It was just that their thoughts were in different directions. However, not many people really cared about this matter. After all, in essence, this involved the relationship between the countries, and had nothing to do with their internal disputes. However, at the male guest seats, there were many glances at Li Hongyuan. At the female guest seats, Jingwan suffered almost the same treatment. However, no matter how you looked, as the person involved, you ignored it. You felt powerless as if you punched cotton. Luqingdi was in charge with a gloomy face, so the lively atmosphere was naturally less. The singing was still on the stage, but the overall atmosphere was as if no one was listening to it. In this way, the troupe was naturally trembling with fear. They did not know what the problem was, so they became more cautious and restrained those who were not on the stage. At this time, they did not want to be meritorious, but they did not want to be wrong. The troop leaders repeatedly warned their subordinates not to have any thoughts that they should not have. After all, in their situation, if one person had an accident, it would often affect everyone. The ins and outs of the whole matter were investigated very quickly. It was the commander of the Imperial Guards, along with several Imperial Guards and Luqingdi's personal attendants. The conclusion was only one word: coincidence. Luqingdi was supported to rest. Those who waited on him were his personal attendants and palace maids. Later on, there were people who went to see him. If they were not concubines, then they were princes. Basically, they did not say anything and did nothing. Jin Qinhuang stayed the longest, but that was because Luqingdi kept holding his hand and did not let go. Moreover, after Jin Qinhuang left, there were also people who went to see him. Then, Luqingdi, who was sleeping well, suddenly woke up and went outside by himself. He did not allow people to follow him. For Luqingdi, this point was easy to explain. Then, he met the similarly drunk Princess Yining who was strolling around. According to the people around Princess Yining, their princess also did not allow people to follow her, but they basically stayed far away. There were also the Imperial Guards who stood guard in their positions. This could prove that in this process, no one approached her. The two drunkards bumped into each other, and then inexplicably rolled together. Fortunately, they chose a nearby palace and not in the open. Things developed too quickly. By the time the attendants arrived, the clothes had already been taken off and they entered the main topic. Princess Yining did not struggle and did not shout. On the contrary, she was very enthusiastic, not at all like she was forced. If it was not for the blood that fell, one would really suspect the identity of this princess. It was also because of this that Luqingdi's personal attendants stopped Princess Yining's servant girls. After all, their master was having fun, they only had the role of assisting. Not to mention disturbing, all external factors had to be eliminated. They also had to quickly get a brazier to warm up the room, so as to prevent their master from catching a cold. All suspicious things were checked, and more than once. The final result was the same. To get such a result, although it was not a conspiracy, but Luchingdi's gloomy mood was not much better. Because he knew very well why he went out, because he dreamed of his buy-in. But what happened later, he really did not know. Perhaps it was because he was in a trance and saw the wrong person. And the former Wei Crown Prince did not get any useful information from Princess Yi Ning. He carefully interrogated Princess Yi Ning's servant girls, but did not find anything wrong. The servant girls were all brought from Great Wei, and there was absolutely no possibility of them being bribed. Princess Yi Ning just kept crying. According to the Crown Prince's understanding of her, she was really bullied. She had already started to make a scene. It was clear that she still remembered something, and perhaps the whole process was clear. The former Wei Crown Prince looked at her sinisterly. At this time, he really wanted to tear her alive. Luchingdi left people to serve Princess Yi Ning. Princess Yi Ning's servant girls did not dare to speak in detail, but they did not have such scruples. Moreover, by Luchingdi's side, they had heard a lot of Luchingdi's women corner, and did not have any taboo. It was simply vivid and vivid. A woman who really did not know what was going on, even if she was drunk, would not be so unrestrained. Therefore, even if there was blood, it made people suspect that this princess's body was not clean at all. This seemed to make people guess the reason why this princess was exiled. Because she did something ugly, the former Wei capital could not tolerate her, so they simply made use of trash. Although they probably only expressed the first half of the meaning, in the years of the former Wei people, they naturally filled in the second half. Shut up for this princess. Princess Yi Ning roared with a ferocious face. That was definitely her sore spot. The eunuch was startled, but then he laughed. Princess, why are you angry? No matter what the princess is, it's fine as long as our emperor likes her. In other words, the matter was already decided. Pleasing Luchingdi was the only way out. Unfortunately, the eunuch was very clear that this former Wei princess had definitely incurred the disgust of his master. Even if she was given a higher position, she would definitely be very miserable in the future if she did not tuck her tail between her legs. Although under normal circumstances, she would not easily lose her life. Get out. The former Wei Crown Prince rubbed his brows and pointed at the door. The eunuch was very obedient this time, but the door was wide open and there were imperial guards guarding outside. The former Wei Fifth Crown Prince was impatient to continue waiting. He sneered and directly left. He was too lazy to care about this trivial matter. The former Wei Crown Prince looked at Princess Yi Ning. Speak, do you want to die or live now? Chapter 408. The former Wei Crown Prince looked at Princess Yi Ning. Tell me, do you want to live or die? Princess Yi Ning, whose eyes were filled with hatred and who looked like she was crying pitifully, was stunned when she heard this. She forgot to cry and also forgot to maintain the emotions in her eyes. At this moment, her thoughts were blank for a moment. After a moment, panic appeared on Princess Yi Ning's face. She grabbed the former Wei Crown Prince's sleeve. Her tears were like broken beads. Imperial brother, enough, what are you crying for? What's the use of crying now? You are now one of the Qi Yuan Emperor's people. You should know that the previous plan is useless. You can be obedient now and I will do my best to fight for a higher position for you. There are still 2 vacancies among the Qi Yuan emperors for concubines. If you continue to cry and make a fuss, you will only provoke the Qi Yuan emperor's disgust. You know what will happen to you. If you really don't want to live, it's good that you die now. After all, you are our Wei Crown Princess. If you are humiliated and die in Qi Yuan, our Wei Crown Princess can more or less use this as an excuse to make trouble for the Qi Yuan Emperor. If we do it properly, we can gain a lot of benefits. Princess Yi Ning was in despair. How can you treat me like this? How can you? You are a group of inhumane bastards. Bastards, the former Wei Crown Prince was indifferent. There is no family affection in the royal family. You should have realized this earlier. Also, let me tell you, if you want to have a better life in the future, put away your current moral integrity. Emperor Qiyuan is the sovereign of the 9 and 5. The woman who was slept with by him, regardless of whether it was voluntary or forced, in his eyes, being slept with by him is a great favor. You look like you can't wait to directly enter the cold palace. Although Princess Yi Ning was indignant, she gradually restrained her emotions and was no longer hysterical. The former Wei Crown Prince sneered, "It's good that you have thought it through." This younger sister naturally didn't want to die. If she really had the courage, she should have died when she was still in the Wei. Following the Emperor of Qi Yuan is not necessarily a bad thing. Other than being a little older, in other aspects, isn't it better than the powerless Jin Qin Wang? Yi Ning, you are young and beautiful. You have an advantage that others don't have. If you can make the Emperor of Qi Yuan happy, not only will he favor you, even if he values you a little, you will still be able to live a life of luxury. You have always been smart, and you are well aware of the intrigue in the palace. You don't need me to teach you what to do. Princess Yi Ning was unwilling and indignant. However, ever since she had been chased out of the capital of the Great Wei, she was no longer so naive and followed her heart. Moreover, people of the royal family might be born with the ability to weigh the pros and cons, and knew how to play politics. Based on all these factors, Princess Yi Ning was also very clear about her current situation. But when she thought of Jin Qin Wang and then thought of the Emperor of Qi Yuan, there was such a difference between heaven and earth. No matter how she thought about it, it was hard for her to calm down. Are we just going to let it go like this? I was clearly tricked. Then why don't you tell me, how did you get tricked? As long as you can tell me a suspicious point, I will help you investigate it to the end. Yi Ning, ever since you entered the palace, you have always been with us. You have never come into contact with the people of Qi Yuan. You ate and drank the same things as us. Even when you got drunk and left Xianchen Hall, you did not leave the line of sight of your servant girl. Tell me, what is the problem? Moreover, before you entered the palace, I already told you not to casually walk around in places like Qi Yuan's palace. Do you still think that this is the imperial palace of the Great Wei, where you can casually walk around? Towards the end, the former Wei eldest prince's face was full of haze. Princess Yi Ning mumbled and did not speak. In fact, she basically remembered the entire process. Although she felt that there was something strange about it, she could not tell what the problem was. I will take care of the rest. You stay here obediently and do what you need to do. If you make any more trouble, you can just wait to fend for yourself. After that, the former Wei eldest prince flicked his sleeves and left. For disobedient people, it was always necessary to teach them a lesson before they would learn. In reality, it did not matter to him who his sister followed. He was just annoyed that she was disobedient and caused trouble. The former Wei eldest prince returned to the stage in the imperial garden. Compared to when he left, his anger had eased a lot. Your Majesty the Emperor of Qi Yuan, about my sister, enough. Lu Qingdi waved his hand and interrupted him. Send someone to write a decree. Princess Yi Ning of the Great Wei will be conferred the title of virtuous imperial concubine. She will be given the main hall of Yi Palace. He did not even turn his head. However, everyone knew who he was talking to. However, Lu Qingdi's decisiveness shocked many people. Those who did not know about the imperial noble consort and knew about the previous events were shocked that Luqingdi treated Princess Yi Ning too well. Especially those concubines other than Empress Sun, noble consort Su, and noble consort Qin. They almost tore the handkerchiefs in their hands. The thing that they could not get no matter how hard they tried was easily obtained by a princess of another country. Just because she was a princess. Obviously, these people were blinded by jealousy. They were completely finished. What kind of attitude did Luqingdi have before? As for the former Wei eldest prince, it was more like there was a lump in his throat. He could not spit it out or swallow it. It was very uncomfortable. He had thought a lot on the way here. He had basically made up his mind on how to fight for the greatest benefits for his side. However, Luqingdi's Taisheng did not wait for him to speak and everything was settled. He had strength but nowhere to use it. There was no sense of accomplishment. Was the dust settled? How could it be? Li Hongyuan picked up the teacup and took a sip. The good show was yet to come. However, Li Hongyuan did not care. He was still a bit lazy and watched the show casually. As for how much he watched, probably only he himself knew. After all, the people of other countries, except for the former Wei, did not know that Luqingdi had slept with Princess Yi Ning. Sure enough, the leader of the West Han tribe and the bulliest person beside him, the person who did not go up because of He Zhihai's strength, both stood up with a rare anger and even ruthlessness. Your Majesty the Emperor of Qi Yuan, eldest prince of the Great Wei, what do you mean by this? They were almost gnashing their teeth. Luqingdi frowned. His eyes were filled with confusion. The former Wei eldest prince was also puzzled at first. However, he thought of a possibility. Suddenly, he felt like he was about to explode. He was cursing in his heart. Yi Ning's marriage partner was the West Han tribe. Now, it seemed that the court had already communicated with the West Han tribe. However, they did not tell him. Thus, he did not consider the West Han tribe at all. Originally, if the West Han tribe did not know, everything would be fine. But now, the former Wei eldest prince only wanted to vomit blood. https://11/118077/7970615. Biku Pavilion Mobile Reading Website, M. Chapter 409. Luqingdi was naturally unhappy to be hated for no reason, so he had to ask for the reason. That tall and sturdy Xiongnu man sneered, Great Wei's emperor and my king wrote a letter, wanting to marry their Princess Yi Ning to the Xiongnu to establish friendly diplomatic relations between the two countries. Today, His Majesty Qi Yuan Emperor actually bestowed Princess Yi Ning as a consort. What is the reason? In fact, if this matter had nothing to do with him, he would not be so angry. The problem was that Princess Yi Ning was originally prepared for him. Otherwise, he probably would not have come to Qi Yuan this time. As King Li of the Right Valley, he had royal blood and great power. How could he be played like this? Originally, in the eyes of King Li of the Right Valley, Princess Yi Ning looked delicate, but compared to other people, he preferred women from Qi Yuan. He had abducted many from Qi Yuan's border, and more than 10 had fallen into his hands. Therefore, he wanted to have a taste of Qi Yuan's noble women. Unfortunately, the former Wei and Qi Yuan had the same heritage, and the former Wei imperial family was very close to the people of Qi Yuan. It could be said that this was exactly what he wanted. He was only King Li of the Right Valley, and his status was still a little low for a princess of a big country. However, when he brought her back, he would have the final say on who she would marry. When King Li of the Right Valley saw Princess Yi Ning, it was completely in line with his imagination. To some extent, he had already regarded Princess Yi Ning as his woman. Now, he was told that Princess Yi Ning had become the concubine of the Emperor of Qi Yuan. How could he not be angry? When everyone heard this, their hearts were in their mouths. Of course, those who were completely unrelated to this matter were happy to watch a good show. Everyone was waiting for Lu Qingdi to be angry, but Lu Qingdi was much calmer than expected. He just looked at the crown prince of former Wei coldly. The former Wei is preparing to marry one woman to two people. It's a good plan. There was no obvious anger, and his tone was flat, as if he was just stating a simple fact. But the more he was like this, the more it made people feel at a loss. After all, sometimes, when emotions were completely expressed, it was better for people to take the next step according to the other party's emotions. If they did not reveal anything and could not guess, they might do something wrong. Thus, the crown prince of former Wei could not stop himself from breaking out in a cold sweat on this cold day. Emperor of Qi Yuan, there is a misunderstanding. At this time, he could not care less about the West Xiong people, not only because they were now in Qi Yuan's territory, but also because the Great Wei and Qi were neighbors, and had nothing to do with the Xiong people. The reason why the former Wei chose the West Xiongnu was not without the intention of joining forces with the West Xiongnu to divide up the Qiyuan. After all, no matter which of the two countries it was impossible for them to swallow the Qiyuan for themselves. Misunderstanding. It's fine to say that what happened before was a coincidence, but you've been eyeing my son since a long time ago. Is this a misunderstanding? Don't tell me that the former Wei has the intention of forming a marriage alliance with the West Xiong people, and you even brought your princess out this time. Lu Qingdi's words were full of mockery. However, after thinking about it carefully, this matter was indeed suspicious. Just as Lu Qingdi said, if they had already negotiated, then it would be impossible for Princess Yi Ning of the former Wei to fall in love with Prince Jin of Qi Yuan to happen. After all, if they did not communicate with the West Xiong people, they would not know about Princess Yi Ning, so there was no possibility that the West Xiong people were lying. Then, either the envoys of the former Wei really did not know about this matter, or the people of the former Wei acted on their own after arriving at Qi Yuan. The former situation was pure nonsense. The West Xiong Palace was much further away from the capital of the Qi Yuan than the capital of the former Wei. In terms of time, if the West Xiong people knew about this matter, it would be impossible for the people of the former Wei not to know about it. As for the latter, even the 3 members of the royal family would not dare to disobey their father. The most reasonable explanation was that Princess Yi Ning knew about everything and did not want to go to that barbarian land to suffer, so she wanted to stay in Qi Yuan and acted on her own initiative. As for why the first prince of the former Wei did not try to erase this matter, but instead secretly helped Princess Yi Ning, no one would believe that he loved his sister too much. It could only be that he helped Princess Yi Ning achieve her wish, so he could gain more benefits. The first prince of the former Wei could not speak of his bitterness. To be honest, he really did not know that he had already reached an agreement with the West Xiong people. Otherwise, he would have kept a close eye on Princess Yi Ning from the beginning and would not let her cause any trouble. But in the end, everything was too late. Even if the West Xiong people had arrived 2 days earlier, as long as they heard that Princess Yi Ning had fallen in love with Prince Jin, they would not be indifferent. Then, the matter could still be salvaged. In fact, as long as Princess Yi Ning did not sleep with him, there was still room for negotiation, but, the former Wei crown prince cursed in his heart. Since they'd already reached an agreement, why didn't they directly send him to the West Hun tribe? Why did they have to send him to Qiyuan? Wasn't that just looking for trouble? Naturally, there were also people who were furious that this matter was concealed from them. Your Majesty the Emperor of Qi Yuan, this matter is indeed, Lu Qingdi waved his hand, there is no need to explain this matter to Zhen. Your Princess Yi Ning is already Zhen's woman. This is a fact that cannot be changed. Otherwise, you can bring her corpse back. He was the emperor. His woman, whether he liked it or not, was his. Even if she was thrown to a corner to rot, he could not give it to others, unless she was dead. The first prince of the former Wei choked on a mouthful of old blood, but there was nothing he could do. In this situation, even if Princess Yi Ning was really dead, it was worthless. Now that Lu Qingdi had received tangible benefits, he did not pursue this matter further. However, the West Xiong people were not so easy to deal with. Even if they could not get their hands on the first Wei, they were bound to take a piece of flesh from the first Wei. However, considering that the West Xiong people and the Great Wei were separated by Qi Yuan to the south, and several small and medium-sized countries and the North Xiong people to the north, no matter how much they argued, it was impossible for them to directly start a war. Thus, the first prince of the former Wei breathed a sigh of relief. However, even so, the matters that followed were still enough to make him badly battered. Moreover, after returning to the Great Wei, some people would not easily let him off. The West Xiong people worshipped brawn, but it did not mean that they were simple-minded. They still knew what attitude they should take. After a few simple words from Lu Qingdi, they finally knew who the culprit was. Moreover, the first prince of the former Wei obviously treated Qi Yuan differently, which naturally angered them even more. This caused the first prince of the former Wei to be constantly busy dealing with the West Xiong people before he left Qi Yuan's capital. At this time, the West Xiong people began to sharpen their swords and prepared to cause trouble for the first Wei. Unexpectedly, with a bang, something was thrown on the table of the West Xiong people's chairman's seat, knocking over a plate of refreshments. It was a wine cup. Looking around, Jin Qinhuang looked over with cold eyes and an expressionless face. Have you all forgotten what day it is today? Either postpone this matter, or immediately get out of the Qi Yuan's imperial palace. https://11/118007/8011744. Chapter 410. Therefore, the king of hell was indeed the king of hell. When he was angry, he didn't care who you were. If it were anyone else, even Lu Qingdi, they wouldn't do such an arrogant thing. He did it and took it for granted. However, even the people of Qi Yuan who hated him the most didn't think it was wrong. Lu Qingdi's mood improved a lot. After all, his son was protecting his dignity. He also wanted to throw these people out, but he couldn't because of his status. No matter how high a person's status was, he would still be restrained. After being criticized by Li Hongyuan in such a rude way, the former first prince of Wei was a little more rational. However, the people of West Han were not so good-tempered. They looked at Li Hongyuan as if they wanted to tear him apart. However, would the king of hell be scared by this kind of look? His eyes were emotionless as he looked back. Gradually, a vicious aura surrounded his body as if it had materialized. His gaze had not changed much, but it was enough to make one's heart jump. The West Han tribe's Right Valley king even uncontrollably took 2 steps back. Because of this action, that Right Valley Li Wang's expression became even worse. However, for some reason, he didn't continue to act out. How should it be said? The feeling that the other princes gave him was that if he didn't stop here, this Qi Yuan prince would take his life. That kind of gaze of being seen as a dead person was too obvious. This king wouldn't care about what others cared about. This king dared to do what others didn't dare to do. The king of West Han held his breath and sat back down. Naturally, the other Han people didn't dare to make a fuss. Even the leader of West Han people, his status wasn't as high as the king of West Han, but he was eloquent. This wasn't a war, so it was better for him to be the leader. His gaze swept over the king of West Han and landed on Li Hongyuan. He also remained silent. Li Hongyuan withdrew his gaze and continued to watch the show. It seemed that all his attention was attracted to the show. It was as if what just happened didn't happen. The vicious aura around him came and went quickly. Some people around him couldn't help but pat their chests and go back to their positions. However, their eyes still glanced at Li Hongyuan from time to time. There was only a wrong name, but there was no wrong nickname. A king of hell with a strong aura was really too terrifying. From the looks of it, he had really restrained himself a lot in the past 2 years. The show continued on the stage while the audience remained silent. There were only a handful of people who were not affected by today's events. Near evening, snow began to fall from the sky again. However, at this time, the scheduled opera time was almost over. Therefore, the heavens really gave Luqingdi face today. There was about an hour of free time, followed by the banquet. Jingwan took the opportunity to check on old Madame Luo again. She was afraid that she would catch a cold. After all, the north was much colder than the south. Moreover, the palace was different from home. At home, there were servants waiting on her. Even if she went out for a walk, she didn't have to stay outside for too long. Towards the concern of the younger generation, old Madame Luo naturally enjoyed it. She pulled Jingwan's hand. "Don't worry about me. In the past, before winter arrived, you would think of all kinds of ways to keep me warm. You couldn't wait to sweat me out in the middle of winter. Last year, wasn't everything fine? Besides, your grandmother, was born in the capital. I've been in the capital for more than 10 years, how could I not adapt?" Old Madame Luo had a kind smile. "It's you who should not catch a cold. It's not good for your body." Old Madame Luo's hand was warm, so Jingwan was relieved. "This is the palace. If you stay outside for a long time, your hands and feet will easily catch a cold." Old Madame Luo smiled with a different meaning. "With Jin Qinwang here, those palace servants will naturally take good care of me." Being teased by her own grandmother, even if Jingwan's skin was getting thicker and thicker, she couldn't help but blush at this time. "Yada, you only miss your grandmother. How come I don't see you caring about grandfather?" Luo Peishan said with a slightly sour tone from the side. "Even if the birthday isn't celebrated every year, there will be at least several kinds of palace banquets every year. There's no lack of it in the winter. Grandfather has long been used to it. Moreover, your body is healthy, so you naturally don't need me to worry about it." Jingwan chuckled. Luo Darren sighed. "It's said that only when a child cries, there will be candy to eat. This old person needs to have a little illness and a little disaster to be cared for." "What nonsense are you talking about? Quickly shut up. How many people want to have a good body? They can't even ask for it. You're already so old, yet you still want to pretend to be obedient after getting a bargain." Old Madame Luo really wasn't polite. Luo Darren expressed that his old face couldn't hang on. "In front of the children, you should at least leave me some face. Face is earned by oneself." Old Madame Luo gave him a sidelong glance. Luo Darren begged for mercy and didn't dare to say any more. He really didn't have any status in front of his wife now. The other members of the Luo family laughed on the side but didn't say anything. Although their worldview may be a little bit cracked, this kind of harmonious atmosphere was really rare in other families. The grandeur of the banquet didn't lose to the daytime in the slightest, and because of the bright lights, it added to the festive atmosphere. Although it wasn't completely dark and the atmosphere didn't reach the best effect, but in the winter, the sky darkened quickly. Don't look at how bright it was now, it was only a matter of a blink of an eye. After everyone took their seats, Luqingdi arrived late, followed by Princess Yi Ning in a splendid dress. No, now it should be called Xian Fei. Previously, Wei Xian Fei had always been wearing exotic clothes. Now that her identity was different, her clothes were naturally different. She put on traditional clothes, suddenly tied up in a high bun, and her hair was full of hair accessories. Her face was completely highlighted, especially her eyes, which looked more lively. No matter what the origin of Wei Xianfei was, and no matter whether Lu Qingdi liked her now, she was young and beautiful. Men were born with bad habits, so no one could guarantee that one day in the future, Lu Qingdi wouldn't fall in love with her. Therefore, it was natural for the ordinary concubines to be jealous. After all, in a place like the imperial palace, one could only rely on one man. There were 3,000 beauties in the imperial harem, competing for the favor of one person. If one person's favor was more, the others would have less. Some people ate the meat, and the rest might not even be able to drink the soup. In the imperial harem, there were only 2 or 3 who could survive without Lu Qingdi's favor. Even so, they wouldn't push away Lu Qingdi's favor. Jingwan didn't know what state Wei Xianfei was in after the accident, but looking at her now, she seemed to have adapted well to her new identity. At least on the surface, there wasn't the least bit of reluctance, and there wasn't the least bit of worry. Jingwan leaned closer to Li Hongyuan and lowered her voice. This Wei Xianfei doesn't look simple, but I don't know if she has perfectly concealed her emotions, or if she just wants to stay in Qi Yuan. In the end, she doesn't care who she's with. If it's the latter, then doesn't it mean that our Jin Qinhuang's charm isn't as big as expected? There was a bit of ridicule in her words. Because of a skin bag, to like someone, how shallow. It's better to be like Wan Wan, seeing a person's true nature and being moved is the best. She really grabbed the opportunity to stick gold on her face, there really wasn't anyone else like her. Lu Qingdi's mood seemed to have improved. For a man, to receive a beauty, who was even a princess of an enemy country, he would feel a bit of superiority. Adding on to his age, after the initial anger, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was in high spirits. Lu Qingdi held his wine cup and stood up. With a bit of passion, he said a few dignified words, and then let everyone enjoy to their heart's content. There were 2 more hot dishes in the evening than during the day. These kinds of dishes that were continuously heated naturally couldn't go bad during the heating process. Jingwan didn't have much appetite, and her mood wasn't very high. What's wrong, are you not feeling well? Li Hongyuan gently frowned, his eyes unconsciously dyed with some worry. No, just a bit regretful. I shouldn't have sent it up. Although her words were a bit vague, Li Hongyuan understood her meaning, don't think so much. In the end, it's just a dead object. She may not care. Indeed, it's unreasonable to say this now. After all, I'm still the main culprit. It was she who schemed against the former Princess Wei Yining. When Lu Qingdi missed the imperial Gui Fei, he slept with another woman. His anger only lasted for a short period of time. Now that she was angry, wasn't it taking advantage and still acting innocent? Wan Wan, there are some things that you should be clear about in your heart. Indeed, she was very clear. Not to mention the men with the current background, even in her previous life, some men kept saying that they loved someone, but it didn't prevent them from having an affair with another woman. Not to mention the emperor of a feudal society. They could think of a dead woman for more than 20 years, they could already be said to be infatuated. Asking them to keep their chastity, that would be the biggest joke. If she still cared about it when she knew it, she would also be a joke. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but pick up the food with her hands a little faster. For no reason, her grief and anger turned into appetite. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan, who was eating angrily with a bit of childishness inexplicably. In his eyes, she was lovable no matter how he looked at her. The imperial Gui Fei was his biological mother. However, it was impossible for a man like Li Hongyuan to have any feelings for a woman he had never met. Therefore, he didn't care about Lu Qingdi at all. He didn't care whether it was blasphemy to the dead imperial Gui Fei or not. What he cared about was only Jingwan. Li Hongyuan turned his head and waved to eunuch Mu. Eunuch Mu hurried to him. Master. Ask the imperial kitchen to prepare a bowl of antique soup. Jingwan looked up when she heard that. Why do you want that? Antique soup, in fact, was the hot pot of Jingwan's previous life. It got its name from the sound of the food being thrown into the boiling water. In Qi Yuan, antique soup was actually not very presentable. Moreover, in this current situation, Jin Wangye, can you restrain yourself a little? Ben Wang suddenly wants to eat it. Wan, do you have any objections? Li Hongyuan hooked his lips and smiled. Jingwan silently retracted her line of sight. In front of so many people, was it necessary to break the rules like this? As long as you're happy. https://11/118007/81233362 Mobile edition. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.